What up, Pate people? Welcome to my garden, now Portuguese garden. Actually an Airbnb, but it's quite cozy. And look who's here, a wild Swede. Haha. All right, today with us we have Mr. Frogmonkee, or Frogmonkee, how do you prefer I would pronounce your name?
You can just call me Frog.
Frog. What up, Frog? So in the room with me, as usual, Mr. Deacon Bro. I don't know what happened to Ven, but you know how DAOs are. When somebody falls, you just pick up and keep running. Frog, have you ever been on a podcast before?
Technically, I guess this is my second, but the first one was like for BanklessDAO, so sort of first like, external podcast. Super.
No, but it's fine. We love sloppy seconds at this house party. We usually start, Frog, with updates from Deacon around the DAOhaus universe, and I like that. So why not you take away, Deacon? What happened this week on the DAOhaus planet?
We're getting some cool stuff with NFTs going on. Kind of talked about it last week, but there's a proposal. We're doing a collaboration with Rarible, and there's a proposal for the Rarible DAO now. So if you got Rary, go give us some support. It looks like it's going to pass, but it's going to be a really cool integration for kind of collector, curator, creator kind of DAOs based around NFTs in that space. Yeah, and we just got a lot of different kind of initiatives going on. Kind of like the difference between Moloch DAO and Moloch DAOs was something that came up earlier.
Well, it's an important discussion.
Right. So Moloch DAO is a DAO, and it's the first DAO that used these set of contracts. They do grants. Still doing a lot of cool stuff. You don't hear about them as much, but they've kind of reworked the way they do their grants. But really cool project still, obviously. And then the Moloch DAOs the DAOhaus DAOs are DAOs that have some aspect of this Moloch contract. We're on the new version, and there's a newer one coming, and the key aspect to the Moloch contract is one of the treasuries. It doesn't have to be all of them, but one of the treasuries is actually owned by the DAO members through shares and like weighted share governance. So that treasury they can rage quit from. Since the original Moloch, we've added the ability to add multiple treasuries, some rage quittable, some not rage quittable, NFT treasuries, or vaults as we call them. And so, so that's the difference. There's a contract called the Moloch contract, and it's maintained by a community of open source developers, and that's that.
That's that. That was Beginner's Corner at the House Party podcast. And well, if you haven't heard of Frogmonkee, which you now will, he is a monkey with a typewriter, and he's an active member of the BanklessDAO, the young baby DAO. Do you guys already have a platform of choice? So the way our paths crossed is because some of our collaborators in DAOhaus and Raid Guild showed up in the forum and said, "Hey, yo, consider DAOhaus as a way to deploy your DAO." And people were like, "Whoa, you're shilling your DAO." Like, no, guns on the floor. We're just DAOists, and we like DAOists, and we want to be DAOists together. And that's kind of how we ended up inviting Frogmonkee to be here today to tell us how has it been, sort of the journey so far on the BanklessDAO. So maybe as we progress, we start talking about BanklessDAO and we go more towards your experience and the things you want to achieve or what you're excited about, things like that. Does that work for you?
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I can talk about this all day. I'm pretty sure that's why we're all here, right?
Take it over from me. I only speak in the first 3 minutes of this podcast, and then later.
Yeah, no.
You got the church bells going in the background or something.
I do have church bells. Portugal is a Catholic country. It's hard to avoid.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, so like BanklessDAO was sort of created on May 4th this year, right? So like a little bit less than a month ago. Basically, I mean, I think all of us sort of know the general story, I would assume, but basically, like, there was a retroactive airdrop of a bunch of governance tokens for people that had like been premium subscribers, and they just opened up a Discord, and they had the collab land bot. Make sure you have this minimum amount. If you have it, you're in. If not, there's sort of like a courtyard area. And yeah, I mean, that was it, right? So I think like a lot of DAOs typically start with this sort of core team of people, especially when it comes to like DeFi protocols. You sort of start with this core team of people and expand outwards. What was really cool about BanklessDAO is that it started sort of like radically decentralized to begin with. I mean, if you sort of look at like the token distribution on our June analytics dashboard, like the majority of people that are holding tokens are between like 35 to 150K, which is not whale status, basically. So yeah, I mean, like everyone was sort of dropped into a Discord, and sort of organization and coordination started to sort of like naturally emerge. For reference, like we're really a DAO in name only. I don't even know if I really like to use the word DAO as much as like digital organization, but that's a personal take. I mean, we just have like a multi-sig, and really like the signers in the multi-sig are all like Bankless LLC members, right? It's like Ryan, David, Lucas, Luke, those guys. So I mean, truly, like we're really not decentralized at all. I mean, they can just rug pull on us if they want to. But keep in mind, like we're only 3 weeks old, right? This is sort of this like massive DAO experiment on steroids. I think like what's really cool about BanklessDAO is the scale, right? I mean, we have like thousands of members in the Discord, and I think a lot of DAOs, how they typically start, it's just a small community of people that really want to do something powerful. So it's a really cool experiment in that sense. And we're only about like 3 weeks in. We're starting to like build out our roadmap. We're starting to have more serious discussions about governance and like tokenomics. But for the past few weeks, I mean, we've been trying to just get a cadence going, and I think we've gotten that now, which is like super cool.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive in that short amount of time for the amount of people you're dealing with. I'm actually curious on how that kind of started with. So it's interesting. So the token was dropped, I guess, to subscribers of the Bankless podcast, which is an awesome podcast. I'm sure everyone here has checked it out, but if you haven't, then you definitely should. But so there was like a stipulation that you had the POAP or something like that, I think. And then what was like the first initiative to like start the Discord group, or was the Discord group already there and then someone was just like, well, let's add collab land to token gate some rooms? Or how was that first steps?
Yeah, so that first step was dictated by the LLC. So they obviously did the retroactive airdrop, but they had also set up the Discord. They already had like your admin rooms and whatnot. They had collab land set up, but that was really the extent of it.
Cool. And so then when you join, is there like different tiers based on how many tokens you have, or is it just kind of if you have, what is the base, like 2,000 or 3,000 bank tokens?
It's 3,500, which I don't know what.
Yeah, I have 36. 36,000. You're
35,000. Yes.
36,000. 35. You're level 1. 150,000 and over your whale, and then the other levels used to be per invitation. I don't know if that's still
yeah, so that was one of the first things that we like had a really big discussion about, this whole like level system, right? Like Felipe said, it started with if you don't have 35K bank, then you are level 0, right? So you're basically in the courtyard. You don't really have access to the sort of internal channels. And then you had level 2. So level 2 is like a contributor type status, right? These are like community leaders that have sort of started making a name for themselves. And the way to get level 2 was basically like, you need to have the requisite bank, and then you would get invited by the Genesis team, which eventually sort of expand into like getting invited by just, people with the contributor tag in general. And then you have like your whales, and you also have a separate category for liquidity providers. And like, I mean, obviously that's not a great model, right? Like you have levels baked into the hierarchy. Like that's not that's something that we wanted to get rid of quite quickly, and we did. So, I mean, technically we still have like levels, but there's no separation. There's no like level 2 channels or like level 1 channels. The only level of separation that we have is if you don't have the 35K bank, you don't have write permissions to a lot of channels, but all the channels are available. Like they're on read only. So even if you own like no bank, you can enter the Discord and sort of see what's going on. And we'll continue to and we're continuing to like sort of flatten out that sort of social inner circle that this level system has inherently created. So,
well, and I kind of think like the level system isn't necessarily that bad because you have different levels of engagement in a community, right? Some people aren't, they don't have the skin in the game. They're not like they're at the meetings. They're not doing the things. They just hold the token. I don't know necessarily like if, in that case, it does seem like there should be a level.
yeah, so I mean that's a good point, right? Like you do need to differentiate between people that have more skin in the game. I just think the usage of like sort of the terminology and the lingo of like levels isn't the right way to do it. There's been some conversation about like sort of reworking the entire level system so that you only have members and non-members, and then some sort of like internal mechanism to highlight community contributors. But that's like more of a status symbol than it is a position of power within the DAO.
Yeah, and we run into this kind of semantics too a lot of times with like leadership roles. Some people bubble up to the top and just become kind of like a leader role in the community, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's actually really good. But you have to be careful because it's not like they're a boss, right? There's not a hierarchy there. Everyone has the ability to become a leader or to help guide things more because they're respected more. But there's no one that can like fire you, right?
Yeah, there's this
unless everyone decides to fire you, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, so I like to think that I want to be a decentralization maxi, but I want to be a coordination maxi more, right? So the idea is that the main goal is to have legitimate ways of challenging any decision that anybody made in regards to your standing in the community, and give at least the argument a shot to stand on its own. But outside of keeping that completely permissionless, I think it's fine to create temporary structures or things that feel like hierarchies. That's a hard word to say. My God, my brain is molten today. But that being said, I do think that storytelling, narrative, and linguistic semantics, the words we choose to communicate those leadership structures and how temporary they might be, and what creates the legitimacy to occupy spaces in there, that's the discussion, for DAO's working styles. And enjoy the first days of a DAO moment, because it goes, it's like getting a new toy, a new guitar. It's like the beginning of a relationship, and just a very promiscuous one with thousands of people in your case.
Vin, did you?
I'm sorry. No, please continue.
No, I'm done. I'm just
Okay.
segueing.
Yeah. So I totally feel you on like the first, the honeymoon phase of dealing with DAOs. Like, I like burnt myself out big time the first week that this all started. Like I was working, 14, 16-hour days, and the second week I need to like step back and I know what you mean. It's a sinkhole, right? But Deccan, to your point about sort of like, or generally just a point about sort of progressive decentralization as opposed to just out the gate, right? I think like David said, the end goal of decentralization is the inevitable heat death of the universe. Like there's only so much entropy that you can really retain in an organization. So yeah, like I totally agree. Progressive decentralization is the way to probably do it. What the sort of like guidelines for that are, I mean, we're figuring that out as we go. But what I think is interesting is has anyone heard of the like concept of holacracy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not surprised. But
Well, I was doing that before I knew DAOs existed, and when I found out that DAOs existed, I stopped everything I was doing. I was like, "Yo, DAOs." That's my story in a nutshell.
right. So you came in with like the subject matter expertise. But what's really cool about holacracy is like instead of leadership roles and hierarchies, or sorry, leadership positions and hierarchies of sort of command and power, you have roles that people occupy, and those roles have responsibilities, and those responsibilities have, like specific domains that they are in charge of. And roles can be one person, role can be like 5 people, and so that more circular, flat method of structure and organization is where things are going. So, for example, like we have a bunch of different guilds, right? Similar to just guild in the sort of colloquial sense, specialized skill sets, people with specialized skill sets, and each guild sort of has like their de facto representative, and that representative, it doesn't need to be one person. We have like guilds that have multiple representatives in that role. And I'm sure as we continue to expand, that role will, only get filled up more and more with more. So yeah, like roles, responsibilities, not positions of power.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we do something similar here too with we call them circles. And people can be members of multiple circles. They can be. We usually have like representative roles that could be multiple people. If you look at like a holacracy and kind of teal models, like the point is that really anyone can drive the bus. Eventually, is like what I usually say. But another really powerful thing about that is emergence, and it sounds like you guys are having like, being brand new, having the kind of this explosion of emerging different guilds and things like that. How are you guys managing like, someone coming up with an idea like I want to have a writers guild or whatever it is, or are they already kind of like laid out like these are the guilds we need to fill, or is it a mix of those things?
Yeah, I think the question that you're getting at raises sort of a broader point of like, well, how do you take an idea from idea to action, right? Especially within the context of a DAO where, like we were talking about, there is no power structure. There like is no one person that says, hey, you can do this or you cannot do this, right? Unless you sort of go to a snapshot vote or something like that. And so the way that we've sort of handled that problem is the same way that I think all other DAOs have, which is, sort of gathering soft consensus along the way, right? And sort of like progressively expanding that circle of consensus. And so what happens is, we have, I don't know if you guys have seen our Discord, but we have like way too many channels. I indexed all of them at one point and it was like over 1,000 words. It's just ridiculous. But the reason we have those many channels is because like people have so many different ideas that sort of fall into different buckets. And so what happens is people, and this is, again, this is also an interesting point. This is like a procedural best practice. It is not by any means a hard and fast method of taking an idea from idea to action, right? These are like, I mean, okay, let me just say what it is first. What happens is you sort of start in this channel, right? You're like, you have an idea and you're like, oh, I want to create like an NFT auction house, or like, I want us to get on like Mirror XYZ. And so you find a channel, right? You start talking about your idea and people will naturally get interested, right? That's sort of the cool thing about DAOs is like people just sort of fill in the gaps where they're best needed and where they most want to contribute. And so you sort of get an idea out there and people start talking about it and they help workshop. Sort of the next sort of natural step is to like write an informal proposal. So that'll be something, in like a Google Doc or like a Notion page or something like that. They come back to the channel, right? And at that point, they sort of have gathered like a small squad of 2-3 people that are at least interested in the idea. That doesn't mean that they've committed to anything, but they're just like interested in talking it out. So you come back with this like informal proposal, you workshop that a little bit more until it's sort of refined, and then you escalate that up to sort of the next level, right? Which is your forum. And the forum is sort of this broader thing where conversations happen. And, you expose it there, you create like a specialized channel in Discord specifically to talk about that proposal. And then you also have other methods of sort of gathering consensus as well along the way, which is like, the like number of fire emojis on an idea, or we even have a polls channel, sort of like an informal channel where anyone can create a poll just to sort of get like community feedback. So
it's also
for
nice having
example,
those while you guys are like in those channels forming the idea. For those channels to be open, that's just another area where people can like be watching the conversation, even if they're not, highly involved in the orchestration of that. They're there, and if they see something that's like way off, they can chime in, right? Which is also kind of like it can happen before you get to that poll stage.
Like the category that those channels are in is literally called BanklessDAO invites, right? Like if you want to participate in consensus, you want to participate in like, the community aspect of it, just go here, right? You got like, takes 3 seconds to fill out a poll, that's it.
The other good thing about having that kind of transparency is you get like the different groups being able to collaborate more because they might be able to, they can see some place where their guild could, help another guild, or there could be a part where it's like some type of a new guild forms or something, So yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned at the start about getting a roadmap together, and that's something we've noticed is really important. There's like a few documents up front that can help guide the DAO going forward. They're iterative documents, like they're changing over time, but having something like a roadmap and then like a vision or manifesto or something, those are the things that the members can lean on when there does become some dispute or like forking kind of talk or things like that. It's like, we can change these documents, but these are our guiding principles. So, don't break these rules, and this can help lead us, and this is like our mission, things like that. With your roadmap, how has that been like coming together with so many people involved right now? Like in Raid Guild, we just used like the epics from Civ 5 or something, but it's actually been really useful because we've like been able to be like, okay, this is what we need to do to get into the atomic era or whatever it is, and it gives us some direction instead of just kind of like focusing on what's happening now. There's always like that future end goal that we're heading to.
Yep, totally. So to that end, one, remind me when like sometime later in the conversation to talk about Raid Guild. I think there's a lot of overlap between how BanklessDAO will eventually organize and how Raid Guild has done. So potential conversation, in a few minutes. But The to your question about like roadmap and sort of like mission, vision, values, yeah, I mean that's super important. Like one of the biggest things that I wanted to get done sooner rather than later was getting our mission, vision, values sort of set. And I think for the most part, I mean we've done that. Like we've updated. We have a like central wiki on Notion. Um, and you can find that on our website. You can go to bankless.community, and in the resources, there's a wiki tab. But basically, yeah, I mean, we have our mission, vision, values set out, which is really nice. It's one of many documents that we need to sort of define our culture and define who we are. But we're starting on that path. As for the roadmap, I actually wrote a forum post last night on a potential roadmap for BanklessDAO, and it seemed to be received pretty well. So I guess I'll give you some alpha on that. Nothing is like set in stone, obviously.
Give me some
So
alpha.
yeah, the first important thing to understand when it comes to BanklessDAO roadmap is the concept of seasons, right? Relatively familiar for everyone here. Like 1 to 3 month long periods of time where we sort of focus on particular objectives and coordinate around sort of that time frame, right? Right now we're in season 0, right? We're sort of in this like bootstrapping phase, where we're, yeah, I mean like the honeymoon phase. Now, originally, season 1 was supposed to happen or start 1 month after the initial airdrop. So it would have started June 4th. In this post that I wrote yesterday, my argument was like, well, we're not really ready for a season yet. We have about 3 weeks worth of hindsight and perspective on what are sort of the important objectives and important problems that we are starting to face and resolve. And so I took some of those things and turned them into a possible roadmap for season 1. And basically, we should think about season 1 as sort of a test lab for how future seasons can operate, right? Like our scope for season 1 is in theory pretty small, right? We have sort of 2 major projects, outward facing projects that we'll focus on. The first is the onboard project. Onboard, as it sounds, is sort of this like large DAO initiative that touches every single guild in the DAO, and aims to help bring people and help them use DeFi, right? So you have Coinbase Earn, you have Gemini's Cryptopedia, which are great places to sort of learn on paper. But we literally want to create sort of like a rabbit hole, right? You create these like education modules on like a test net where people can, you can send thousands of dollars without it actually meaning anything. And so, we're in the early phases of that. I'd imagine that like season 1 objective is sort of get an MVP of that out, on the internet and like out for people to start using. And so I think that project itself is sort of its own like microcosm of coordination challenges, right? Because like it's not just 1 or 2 guilds that are working together on something. This is, this is a project that involves everyone. And so if we can set a very small scope of just getting an MVP at the door, then we can sort of experiment and observe the different coordination mechanisms that sort of like naturally arise in those couple months and make notes and sort of inscribe some of the best practices into how we operate. And so that's one. The second big project is generating revenue. So this is an interesting topic in general because like, I mean, this is like tokenomics, right? Like you're talking about generating revenue for your treasury. How does that relate to the token? How does that relate to like what the DAO spends its money on, so on and so forth. And one of the good things that Ryan and David sort of emphasized from the get-go is like we need revenue, right? Like let's not inflate the value of our currency just because we have this huge media brand. Let's make let's bring in actual revenue streams so that we can reinvest those back into BanklessDAO and grow it, and like, compensate people that are putting in their sweat equity in these early stages. And so so far we've had 2 successful sort of like proof of concepts for revenue. We did a Meta Factory drop, which went great. I mean, we had like the super dope T-shirt.
Oh yeah.
That was going for like $90, and we sold like over 300 of them. So, I mean, just like that's a great validation data point that the type of revenue opportunities that we have in mind will likely take off. So, I mean, we had like the merch drop, we had an NFT sale. Our Bankless LLC has been working on the BED index with Index Co-op, and we have some other sort of ideas floating around as well. And so another big priority for season 1 is going to be let's start to build the infrastructure so that we can double down on these revenue streams down the road. And so that's like sort of the front of house stuff. And I'll wrap up here quickly. I know I've been rambling, but the other important priorities for season 1 are like the back of house stuff, right? So this is the question of, what is our tokenomics going to be, right? How are we going to govern ourselves? What type of governance framework are we going to use? What type of software are we going to use? And then there's the question of like sort of legal representation as well, which has been pretty fun to consider. I think sort of tangentially, like I really hope that BanklessDAO is able to influence the regulatory environment around DAOs. And given sort of the global presence of our legal guild, I think it's not out of the question, just ambitious.
Well,
Nice.
if
You guys already have a legal guild?
Yep.
they do.
Cool. Yeah,
Actually,
that's nice.
I definitely recommend going to frogmonkee Substack, Monkey with a Typewriter, and taking a look at the only post there so far, which is a mental framework to think about DAO coordination. And one of the images that he has on there is probably the result of a form where the competences that people want to offer to the DAO, the resource layer, as they call it, divided by type of skill set. And so there's a bunch of translators, as you would expect. There's legal, but the highest one, if I'm not wrong, was like community managers. There was a high number of community managers. It's very satisfying for me as somebody who has been involved in this DAO for the last 3 years to see that a lot of things that were considered sort of mystical or hard to get or expert knowledge 2-3 years ago are just coming as common sense to you guys. And that's super nice. One thing that I was interested in hearing more about is how is the relationship with the founding teams, with the LLC, and we expect that there is to be certain not friction with a capital F, but like it's a hard game for things that have a sort of a center to just wake up surrounded by a DAO. Because I've been there before many times. Is there any comments that you can make without making anybody angry on that front, frogmonkee?
I mean, I can probably make some comments that will make people angry, and I don't really mind doing that. I think we should be
Those are welcome. Those are welcome. Also, like unrivaled ambition, also welcome.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, the first thing I'll say is like, what's interesting about BanklessDAO is that it's a media DAO, right? The what's been handed off to members of the DAO isn't this tangible, on-chain thing. It's a brand, right? We've been given a brand to run, and in that sense, like, I don't expect a lot of friction there at all. I think Ryan and David and Bankless LLC have done a great job of sort of figuring out what their sort of ethos and their ideal culture is, and I think that permeates itself pretty well through the DAO community. And so, in terms of like us sort of taking on the mantle of spreading this brand to the larger market, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. Now, if you want my hot take, it's that the Genesis proposal, which is the first proposal that had been voted on, basically like the LLC, did this token drop. They're like, hey, we have no tokens whatsoever. Here's this Genesis proposal where like they're basically allocated 25% of the overall token supply vested over a number of years. And I think like that was pushed through a little bit too quickly. Like 25% of the entire token supply is a lot. I have faith in Bankless LLC that they're not going to like rug pull us or anything like that. But if you're talking about dynamics of power, right? And tokens are capital, capital is power, especially when it comes to governance. They hold a decent amount of power over us, and I'm not scared about that. I'm not like worried that it's going to come to sort of bite us. But I think it would be deluding ourselves to think that we are fully, autonomously organized when 25% of our capital pool is held by one multisig.
Yeah, did that already go through? I forget. I remember that proposal though.
Yeah, that went through in the first week.
I mean, their intention, or how it seemed to me, was they could have just did the 25% beforehand, right? So like my perception of their intention was like, well, we won't do it beforehand. We'll let the community decide. And I could empathize with their desire to do that quickly for many different reasons.
You're totally right. Like, I mean, they deserve sort of the compensation for building the brand from nothing to where it is now.
It's a common problem is like those guys created a ton of value, right? Which I'm sure, I even remember, they mentioned that they've been doing this for a while. So, and that's like I've definitely noticed that trend in this space also, like, Gitcoin's kind of going through, maybe a similar path there where they've been around for a while. They've created a ton of value already. So how do you quantify that retrospectively? I think it's just a common problem that we don't really have a conclusive answer for yet.
Is there were the other 75% of the tokens all distributed through the drop, or is there like a pool of funds that have been set aside as for grants or for other things like that?
Yeah, I think, let's see, 25.5. I think like 30% of tokens have been distributed. 40%, 45% is still locked up in our treasury, vested over I think a 4-year period, and then the 25% that is vested for Bankless LLC over a number of years as well. So basically 25 towards Bankless LLC, 5% in our current treasury right now, 40% vested over time, and then 30% distributed as is.
It's interesting. Yeah. Actually, that multi-sig that holds the treasury would actually be a good place for a DAO, a Moloch DAO, because of it would allow that treasury, the membership in it, to scale better than a multi-sig. Like a multi-sig, you get to 10 members and it's kind of unmanageable, but in a Moloch DAO, it could scale more. But maybe to change the topic back to Raid Guild. So you had some questions about that. Happens that there's a couple of the Raid Guild founders on this call.
Yeah, parallels to the coordination efforts there also. But yeah, certainly curious what your thoughts are.
Like even in all the guilds you're talking about, it seems like that's a good place for these kind of sub-DAO structures similar to Raid Guild to spin up.
Yeah. So let me go into that and another long ramble. So prepare yourselves.
Nice.
Basically, like,
I'm enjoying your rambles, by the way. Just FYI.
Yeah, I think the Raid Guild model of coordinating people with individual skill sets and mapping them to sort of projects is like, it's fucking brilliant, right? Like the fact that you guys have been operating, Raid Guild has been operating for over a year now, like they have way more demand than they you know, they're able to like manage, and they're producing such high quality stuff. Like that is you know, MVP of DAOs being able to coordinate labor to produce products and services. And so like that's sort of what the guilds are doing internally, right? Except like instead of servicing paying clients, we're servicing people in the DAO that want to do things, right? That's sort of the objective of each guild. The objective of each guild is to help support the initiatives of the DAO. But in order to do that, especially when you have, you know, so many different like interconnecting parts, right? You have your like translators that need to, you know, take copy and translate that. You need your writers to like write a product release. You need your developers to create the product. You need like marketing, you know, all this stuff, right? Like a typical sort of organization. And so they're going to need the same type of like coordination structure that I think Raid Guild, for the most part, has already refined pretty well, right? No need to reinvent the wheel. You have your account managers, you have your project managers. Like, you know, I think that's that model will get adopted. And it's even funny, someone within the DAO said like, well, what if Raid Guild just becomes our developers guild, right? Like we don't even need to have our own, right? We can like just plug into that DAO. I'm like, that's a brilliant idea. I hope that happens with every subset of skills.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
I think there's
DAO on DAO.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, DAO on
Go
DAO
for it,
action.
yeah,
Well,
DAO and DAO.
DAO and DAO is our kind of main ambitions at the moment as well. A lot of us in the space are trying to figure out. And I have the intuition that the DAOs themselves will be very large, and they will be these fuzzy structures that it's hard to tell where one begins and the other one ends, and they co-own each other. And the squads, the groups, the high intimacy groups built around specific skill sets or specific projects will become like the stars of the show more than the DAOs themselves. I like saying these things on podcasts because I want to check 3 years from now. So far, so good.
There's an interesting yeah, so you're mentioning like the guilds and how they're kind of organizing within Bankless. And then in Raid Guild, we don't necessarily, I mean, there have been self-organizations of, you know, designers, the project managers, the developers, they've all kind of self-organized into soft groups, but they're not really sub-DAOs yet. It's been talked about definitely a few times over the years, or year, I forget how fast this stuff goes. But there's like an interesting, but in the Raid Guild, you know, it's the actual raid parties are more like where you started with the channels, right? Like all we really do is spin up a channel, and some of those are client projects. You know, someone requested the guild to build something, but a lot of them are just, you know, internal ideas like, oh, to improve the guild or build its own product for revenue generation or something. So, but it all starts with a chat group basically, or like a little channel. And then the people who work on those come from all, you know, there's usually like one, you know, whatever, just say example, like one designer, one developer, one project manager, one, you know, facilitator or something. But they come from different talent groups, and these raid parties are like a collection of various talents. And they, you know, and those join up for that project, or that feels like very close to how you were describing those channels in Bankless, where, you know, if you're really interested in it, if people have intrinsic motivation to do a thing, then they're going to, you know, jump in and be like, hey, I'm down. They're going to raise their hands first, you know, maybe a few people do. And then the people who are most intrinsically motivated to solve that thing or to contribute to that thing will stay the longest and contribute more value. But yeah, so there's like this interesting, I don't know if there's a difference there, or how you guys are organizing based on talent only, or if it's like, if there are like different alignments, like more purpose driven, not talent driven self-organizations happening.
Yeah, so not yet. Right now, our we've organized purely based on sort of skill set and I guess interest as well. That's what I was saying about sort of the parallels between Raid Guild is like once we start identifying like projects, right? So for example, like onboard is sort of a big initiative, right? That's that's not something that can be coordinated just purely based on skill set, right? There needs to be some type of higher level orchestration component to that, which is like your account manager, project manager, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I mean, we're definitely gonna get there. I think right now, I think BanklessDAO's future looks like a combination of sort of the Yearn governance model of using like Y teams. I think there's going to be each guild is basically going to operate like Raid Guild, or at least guilds as a whole together will operate like Raid Guild. Your tokenomics and governance structures are going to rather tokenomics. I think will probably pull pretty heavily from OneHive, and then you have your sort of interesting like social layer with like friends with benefits. So that's I don't know. And then obviously you have your like Moloch structure baked in at various different places within the organization. So
and we've had the thing when we first started Raid Guild, we were like, okay, let's being mainly like freelancers and product developers that were kind of coming together and into this kind of a co-op structure. Like we knew that there's different roles that are very important on the bigger kind of vision, like, and we separated that into a front tavern and a back tavern, and the front tavern being more of these kind of people, soft skills kind of people that can talk to a client and manage that relationship and make proposals and get projects started, and then the back tavern being kind of the devs and us basement dwellers that just program all day. But the raid parties, the idea was like, coming from a product development background, we knew that like once you get 6-7 people on a team, the gains start to go down the more people you add, because the coordination cost is too high. So if you get like a small team with a dedicated purpose and on a project, it actually will work better. You can still use the entire network to share knowledge and to answer questions or whatever, but
rotate contributors as necessary.
Yeah, or swap people in and out. Use that resource talent pool, but to like have a small focused team on something and not a million PR requests coming from all directions made a lot more sense. It seems to be working pretty well.
Please help us copy and paste that into BanklessDAO.
Well, yeah, definitely down to share learnings and as much as possible. I mean, I don't think any of us would say Radio has the answers. But like you said, they've been experimenting for like a year, and there's certainly lots of things to be learned and shared.
Yeah, another place where we're much different is we started from a group of 3 people and just kind of organically grew from that. You guys are starting with a group of 3,000 people or more, dropped all into the same bucket.
Which I agree is like a super interesting experiment. It's not happened before, so this is like the first time all of us are interacting with that coordination / community design problem. Right, it's the first time I've seen it play out, at least. So definitely interesting.
Yeah, what I would say is the acceleration challenge you guys are facing is a first, and everybody's watching and nobody's taking it for granted. And so far, it's very reassuring the way you dealt with it. So yeah, that's worth anything. Yeah.
And Raid Guild is gonna be in a similar situation soon and be expanding its community much larger through something that may still
Sorry, I never want to miss an opportunity to make an evil laugh.
But Raid Guild being a guild in the bigger BanklessDAO, I think would be awesome too. That's that fuzzy line that Felipe was talking about. I think that's really interesting. I kind of think about that.
Yeah. This idea that like DAOs are just going to be like a network of what was it like? You're not going to be able to tell when you get from like one DAO to another, something like that. I hadn't really considered that before, but I really like the sort of future that paints.
Right. I mean, it's it's definitely weird. I mean, so many times in the like even in like here in DAOhaus in the Discord, for example, we'll be all of us are in like whatever 5 to 10 DAOs a piece on average, probably. So like a lot of the times we'll be in a call that's focused on a specific problem that we're supposed to be talking about, and we'll go through that, and then we'll immediately switch to like a completely different DAO problem that we all are a part of, and we just happen to be in the same room, you know. So definitely see that happen a lot. We're just like, oh, well, here, so let's go ahead and tackle that while we're here, kind of thing. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important that like people share what they're learning. I mean, that's like the reason I started my blog, and I think that's the reason that probably a lot of you guys did as well. That being said, so like I do have an interesting thought experiment. So, I mean, BanklessDAO has their native token, right? DAOhaus has theirs. Friends with Benefits has theirs. I wonder what a future will look like when all of these DAOs are operating together, and whether they'll be using native coins as a method of commerce and transaction. I don't. So
yeah, this kid just gets it, doesn't he, Deacon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, here's my take on it. I think so. I'm very against the idea that you need to pay in a particular token to participate with the community. I think like that will only alienate you. I mean, if I'm paying for goods and services, like, I mean, just let me pay in Ether, or like let me pay in DAI. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to have to like go and like have to exchange into your currency and then like pay you, right? That's just
and and also at that point we've talked about that a little bit too. It's like, I mean, people can pay in whatever token, and then you can convert it into your token if you want to, right? So
right, exactly.
literally the same thing. Instead of pushing it on other people, you can just do it yourself.
So here's the thing, right? Like BanklessDAO token is really interesting. I consider it a social token. I think that, I mean, obviously it's a governance token as well, but like, you know, let's forget that.
Social governance, yeah.
Yeah, but like, I think its primary function is going to be a social token. But it's still going to be money, right? It's going to be used as a medium of exchange. It's going to be used as a unit of account. It's going to be used as a store of value. But that is only going to really flourish within the DAO community, right? Like, I mean, if you want to trade bank within Raid Guild, like, you know, by all means, be my guest. But it is a community token first and foremost. And the people that benefit from having bank and using bank and transacting in bank are the people that are part of the BanklessDAO community. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, you had well, you were talking about the communities interacting with each other, and then where that would come into, and you had a.
Oh, right. So
yeah, a world in the future where everything has a token. It's like maybe kind of like your citizenship in the country. You can exchange very easily now, right? And it'll only probably be easier to be able to do swaps. But on the level of DAOs, you know, it's a way to align incentives, like doing the token swaps, and you know, like it's almost, if you're both like invested in the communities doing well through these tokens, it's an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how those kind of alignments happen over time.
And what emerges from it.
Yeah. Right.
Quite a few. Yeah.
And we actually got rid of a bunch of. We had a bunch of like But yeah, it's kind of the interesting thing there is that it's like if a token is kind of like your citizenship, but you can leave and join very liquid.
Liquid
It
citizenship.
opens up like something that's never existed before, and it's like like what you said about choice. Like people really have the sovereignty to do whatever they want with, and to show their alignment however they want. Like selling a token may be like you exiting that DAO, but I don't know. We could probably talk another hour just on that topic.
But I think he was going to say his point.
What were you saying, Deacon? I can hear you.
Just saying, we are out of time for today, but we should probably do another one another day.
Oh yeah, anytime.
Yeah, I noticed that we were at top of the hour, but it's not in my style to interrupt DAO conversations. And it also looked like you guys were like a bit there, and I was like, I'm the 3,754th wheel in this conversation. Guys,
I mean,
yeah, but it has been a
on.
great conversation. Sorry, go Frog Monkey.
I was just gonna say I can stay on for another half an hour, and I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to stay for that.
Okay. I was actually thinking of not going to my next meeting, which is with a lot of the people in this room, because I'm super tired. So I'm happy to host you a little more, because that's not as tiring as a work meeting. But how's everybody feeling about this? Deacon, Bao, Vanilla?
Well, yeah, I still want to give Frog Monkey's. Deacon kind of interrupted him earlier. He was going to kind of finish. Yeah, where you said you had like a feeling of where it was going, that kind of communities transacting with each other, and how their tokens play together.
So there are two of the things that sort of came to mind. One, I think like, I think you were saying earlier that holding tokens is basically sort of like your representation as being aligned with the community, right? So I think that like DAO to DAO sort of interaction, or really any external node that wants to interact with a DAO, I think will have to go through some like staking and like lockup period, right? And you sort of have like staking and slashing as a mechanism of sort of dispute arbitration, I guess, between DAOs, or between like agents of in that sense. So basically, what I'm saying is like interacting with DAOs will involve some degree of staking their token as a way to sort of show skin in the game that you want to like work together. And the second is like, I wonder if DAOs are going to hold, and to some extent this is already happening, but like I wonder if DAOs will hold native tokens of other DAOs as a way to diversify their treasury.
Oh yeah, definitely already happening on that one. Well, and RaidGuild, I think, kind of had an interesting experiment going on there too. Well, still is, but like if one of RaidGuild's clients has a token, and we do work for them, and they pay us in some of their token, and then we put that in the DAO bank. Maybe like 5 people worked on that project. Teller actually was one of our super early clients that had a token. And we just put some of that into the DAO bank, and now the community, the greater RaidGuild community, all had access to, like we had contributed value to Teller. Teller gave us a little bit of their token. Their token went up, and now that upside was shared across the DAO members. It's pretty interesting.
Wait, sorry, say that again. I think that's really interesting. The upside was shared across community?
Yeah, I mean, because, like just the Teller example was like a really early one, but a good one, I think, because they were early themselves as well. But that happens a lot in Guild, obviously, new ideas coming, pre-token and whatever. But yeah, we just, some of us did some work, and then, they paid us in some of their token. I think we got ETH. I think they paid us in ETH and some Teller, some TRB. And then when we do a raid in the Guild, we put some of that back into the DAO's bank. Most of that goes to the people who did the work. but they put in like 10% or whatever back into the DAO, so that everybody in the greater Red Guild community, they all have shares in the DAO, so they all have access to all the tokens in the bank. So
Right,
every time we put that token in the bank, now every member in Raid Guild has access to that upside, or I mean downside obviously is there also, but yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason I'm interested is like one of the conversations that we started having a couple of days ago was like, how do we want to tie bank to something of real value, right? Because right now, like, frankly, like right now, bank shouldn't have any value. It should be worth 0, in my opinion. Like, there's absolutely no reason to hold bank unless you are a like governing member of the DAO. I mean, it's great if you have like faith, right? Like I've been hoarding bank, shield my bags here a little bit, but
well,
yeah.
But there's also the other element to it, right? Like it's an early, I mean, yeah, sure, they've created a bunch of value previously and stuff, but like, this is a new community alignment event regardless, right? So, I mean, by having, tokens early, and therefore governance early, you get to, for someone who's like watched Bankless play out for a while, that there's a lot of value there, there's awesome community, and then you're seeing all this emergent coordination happening, and you're like, oh, well, I have tokens and I'm here to like, I believe that we can create some value together. So,
Sure. But here's the thing, right? Like tell any VC that, hey, we have this token that we think is going to do well because like we had, this media company that blew up. Like, sure, some might buy in, but I mean, most people that are risk off are going to be like, that's not worth anything.
Right.
But if there is this like underlying mechanism where by owning bank, you do literally profit from it, whether it's like dividend payments, whether it's like a buyback thing like Urine does. And so in that sense, like I think right now we are having this conversation about let's tie our token to some theoretical amount of yield that you can gain off of just holding it. And if that's like, a fraction of a percentage of a fraction of a cent, at least there is on paper, bank has value, and then you can start, thinking about some more like innovative and unique token economic DeFi Lego like methods to drive its valuation, whether it's like staking, whether it's burning, whether it's whatever.
I think the issue we get into when we start talking about things like this is the American regulation or lack of regulation. Basically, when you like talk about anything close to what you're talking about, then you're talking about a security. And in America, that's illegal for us plebes to participate in. So it's one of those things that it's almost like maybe because of the lack of regulation, the governance token was born and the social token was born, because it was like, what is a way for us to give utility to these tokens so they're not called securities? I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but.
Do you guys mind if I pop into this discussion about Bankless a little bit?
Not at all.
Do it, bro. Come on.
So my concerns about the Bankless distribution proposal allocating 25% of the tokens to the Bankless LLC is, that proposal in my mind would have been great if they had said, hey, in 2 years before the vesting cliff happens, we will tokenize Bankless subscriptions via, let's say, Boson protocol, and turn Bankless subscriptions into a decentralized commerce affect, with the proceeds going to the treasury. And of course, with Boson, you can create sales incentives, because that allows commissions to happen for companies or people who sell memberships. And it would really drive revenue to the DAO's treasury. So my problem with the Bankless distribution proposal is that it's like, in the context of a regular DAO, like some of the other DAOs I've been in, it's like quadruple dipping. They've allocated 25% of the tokens to their company. They're still individually able to earn the Bankless token through source cred. and their interactions on Discord, the Bankless brand and their personal company subscriptions are going to massively benefit from all of the work that the community puts in. And then they didn't allocate any of that revenue to the DAO's treasury. So that's why I wouldn't participate in it. And then, secondly, there are some novel liquidity backing strategies that we're looking at for decentralized autonomous organizations and like supporting the decentralized autonomous organization ecosystem. And we can't offer those to a DAO that has that level of centralized ownership. Like we can't do that because, it's not supporting that community as much as it is supporting just that company. But anyways, that's my take.
Dude, that is such a good take. I don't know if you were here earlier when I was giving my hot take on the distribution. The TLDR of like what I was saying is like, it's great that Bankless LLC built this brand from like nothing to where it is now. But I did have some questions about the Genesis proposal, and I think the hype of opening up a DAO, and then having this proposal saying like, hey, let's vote on this by the end of the week. Like, yeah, it was rushed, and I don't fault you for being skeptical of the centralization of 25% of the treasury being held by one wallet. That's something that I'm not actively concerned about because I have faith in Bankless LLC, but faith isn't gonna faith doesn't mean shit if if you're on board of it. That's fine. It doesn't mean anything. So yeah, I think your point is very valid, and I think like that's why things like conviction voting and things like quadratic voting are things that are, at least for me, top of mind.
Yeah, or at least like decentralizing that power over the treasury. I mean, that's still like your point, Kyle. Yeah, that's still a hard thing to overcome. 25% is a healthy percent, so there's trust required right now, which is suboptimal to probably everyone in the community, but those with faith and trust in the leaders. But yeah, it's just like the more decentralized that actual power gets over the treasury, then the lower the coordination cost gets, basically, and the more perceived value, I think, to participate in that ecosystem. Maybe.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a huge, obstacle to participation for people who are already, active in the DAO space.
Right.
What do you think we could do about it?
Well, I think that the best solution for that is to, is for the Bankless LLC to make a promise to tokenize the subscription to, to the Bankless products and services. And that can be done through Boson protocol, although obviously it's not ready yet, but the vesting period lasts 2 years, and I'm certain that Boson protocol will be ready by then.
I'm not familiar with Boson too much.
Yeah, same.
I'm kind of curious about we're getting into like the fair launch kind of talks, and like what is fair for founders? I mean, it's
right.
And what is fair for the dev team, and what is fair, like
I think
there is some amount that it is. I mean, it wouldn't exist without the founders putting in the 16-hour days for 2 years or whatever it was.
Right.
Here's the thing. Like, I think the token allocation model, or rather, the remuneration of sweat equity with tokens, is an old way, right? It's like an old-fashioned way of capitalizing effort, I guess, or paying out whatever.
Agreed.
But like we have like money legals, right? I think we can leverage native tokens to pay out massive amounts of value to the core creators without giving them ownership over a large portion of the token supply. But I don't think that's been done yet. That makes sense.
Do you think that like when when you mentioned the timing of the Genesis proposal, and and I mentioned earlier, I mean, I can certainly empathize, why they did want to move fast, and it's not the first time I've seen it either. There's many other, well, not many, but there are a few other communities who've done something similar. Launched a token and then immediately requested from the community to get an allocation, for example. But so would they? I think one thing that could have been done better maybe is just say that we are going to request this proposal, but we're going to allow you guys a time period. This is a new community. We need to give you guys like time to get in here to be able to process our request, right? So maybe if they had like said that we're going to submit this proposal in a month or something, or like delayed it for a month or something, would that have made a difference?
I think so.
I mean, I guess
let me double.
There would have at least been a conversation, I guess, right? So yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Let me double check. I want to make sure I'm not being factually incorrect here when I'm saying that there was a deadline for this. Let me just look through the proposal.
Oh yeah, I was checking it out too, actually.
Yeah, we see different numbers from these like token launches. Like there was one recently where it was like 80% of the tokens were held by the VC.
Yeah.
Or it was like and that the community was allocated like 1.2% of the tokens. So like when you think of it about the old model, which is that VC model, I mean things are totally flipped around even at 25%. But I don't know what's fair. Is it more like 5 or 6% or?
Okay, well, how about this? Well, maybe there is no quantifiable fair metric that any arbitrary community can use. And instead of teams trying to come up with some perfect quantifiable retrospective distribution for themselves, they instead of it being like a thing that's like, every time I've seen it play out, it's been the team or the community, whatever it was, saying this is the distribution. It's always a statement. It's never a question. And maybe it should be an offer of decentralization as opposed to, hey, we did this. This is what it is. If you want to partake in it, then that's, does that make sense? It's like a question and an offer instead of a statement of this is already done. I think would be a big difference in how that plays out. Because then it becomes not just a team trying to come up with some perfect allocation, which has felt to me like nonsense every time we've talked about it. Because it just doesn't. It's not usable anywhere else. It's every community, everything is completely unique, just like every individual. So every one of those needs to be contextual. And it needs to be contextual to the contributors or the community that is going to be partaking in it. So some kind of offer system or something?
Yeah. Two things. One, I looked at the proposal. The deadline was 3 days. So
yeah.
Take that as you will, I guess.
And what was the deadline? What does that even mean?
I think it was up for vote on Snapshot. It went up on like May 4th when
right, and that was the timeline to vote on it, basically. Yeah.
So we see those kind of things a lot where it's like this decision was already made, but we kind of meant to ask the community, so let's do something.
I mean, it's every time it's the same thing, right? Like we think we deserve this. We're afraid to ask the community because we're afraid they're going to say we deserve less. Every time it's the same thing. Right.
Well, let me jump in here for a quick second, because I feel that we are using soft governance too much. I think there's an unspoken aspect of Snapshot and all of these token-weighted votes that don't have on-chain direct consequences on the treasury. I think it affects governance a lot. Maybe we should have an episode on this later.
Yeah, totally.
Because because in our Moloch world, it hasn't happened so much that the large community will truly rise up against and try to truly challenge the hold that the larger holders, the whales, have, like the classic struggle of all the tiny holders trying to get an idea across to the big holders. And I think the reason why this hasn't happened, especially in snapshot sort of situations, is because it doesn't have any direct consequence. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so I think like that's what I was saying earlier about the traditional method of equity allocation, right? Token allocation. Like why not use like an NFT model, right? Like why not lay claim to 10% of all like revenues generated and for the rest of your life? Like I don't know, like what do you think about that as sort of a way to align sort of creator core sweat equity instead of like actual token allocation, but rather some percentage or some like sort of streamed consistent payout that happens by leveraging like yield generating protocols
to a community controlled treasury of some sort.
Right.
The interesting thing in the Moloch called loot shares, which are kind of like the financial shares, but they have no voice. And then the shares are like the voice shares. And what we've seen in some grant giving DAOs where it's like a large group wants to start a grant giving DAO, but they want the members, the shareholders to manage it and not them be the whales that can crush everything, is they'll do like some like maybe quadratically themselves shares versus loot or some max amount of shares and then the rest into loot. That's actually something we're playing with the newer version of Moloch coming out soon too. But I don't know. That's interesting.
I mean, I think in general,
again, I don't know.
Yeah, I think in general what you were saying there is like is important regardless, right? Like, some sustainable streams of revenue going to a treasury that is, where community members have some voice over its utility. And that's not something that's useful now, but also, like you said, yeah, that's something that's useful forever, and will or would, I think, incentivize people to join that community and help contribute value to that community because they know they have power over where the value is being captured, basically.
Yeah. All right, guys. I gotta bounce, but this was so much fun. I will definitely be here for the next one, and looking forward to whoever the next topic is.
Yeah, we didn't even
Congratulations for the longest episode of House Party ever probably. at least in season 2. But it's what we got to do when the host has 2 species. If you had only 1 species, no. But because you have 2, you deserve a little bit more time.
That's true. We exactly never got into my genetic background.
Right. So for all of those who have been in my garden for longer than usual, thank you for listening to the end. It's not every day that you get to talk to a genetic advancement. Give me your final considerations and let's bounce.
Yeah, let's do it again, frogmonkee.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome call, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanilla, for all support. You are essential.
GG.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right, take care, guys.